Our story does not begin with humans. Imagine a young Earth, a turbulent sphere of fire and rock some 3 billion years ago. The air was unbreathable, a cocktail of volcanic gases. Oceans were hot, acidic cauldrons. Yet in this seemingly inhospitable nursery, something extraordinary was about to happen. Life, in its most rudimentary form, began to stir. These were microscopic entities, simple cells, a far cry from the complex beings we are today. But they held the spark. These first life forms were incredibly resilient. They adapted, they survived. They were the pioneers of existence on this planet. For billions of years, these tiny organisms were the sole inhabitants of Earth. They silently transformed the planet. Some learned to harness the sun's energy through photosynthesis. This process, a chemical miracle, slowly began to change the atmosphere itself. Oxygen, a byproduct, started to accumulate. This was a profound shift, paving the way for new, more complex forms of life. For most of Earth's history, life was simple, almost invisible to the naked eye. There was only the slow, persistent dance of single-celled organisms. This ancient world, so alien to us now, is our ultimate origin. Fast forward billions of years, the Earth is now teeming with diverse life forms. 6 million years ago in Africa, a new branch on the tree of life begins to sprout. These were the early hominids, our distant primate ancestors. They were apes, but apes with a difference. They began to walk upright, freeing their hands. Freed hands could carry food, tools, and infants. Standing tall allowed them to see over tall grasses. Their brains were still small, but the seeds of ingenuity were sown. The journey from these early hominids to more advanced forms was slow and arduous. About 2 million years ago, a new player arrived on the scene, the upright man. This species was different. They were taller, had larger brains than their predecessors, and were master toolmakers, crafting sophisticated hand axes. More importantly, was the first hominid to venture out of Africa. They spread across Asia and parts of Europe, a testament to their adaptability. They likely controlled fire, a monumental achievement that provided warmth, protection from predators, and the ability to cook food, making it easier to digest and unlocking more nutrients. For hundreds of thousands of years, various human species coexisted on Earth. In Europe and Western Asia, the Neanderthals thrived. They were robust, intelligent, and well adapted to cold climates. They hunted large game, cared for their sick and injured, and even buried their dead, suggesting a complex social and perhaps spiritual life. In Asia, other groups like the Denisovans lived their own distinct lives. The world was a patchwork of different human types, each with its own story, its own successes, and its own limitations. For most of our existence as we were hunter-gatherers, we lived in small mobile bands following the herds and the seasons. Life was often harsh, but it also offered a certain freedom and a deep connection to the natural world. Then, around 12,000 years ago, in a region known as the Fertile Crescent, particularly in Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, a profound transformation began. Humans started to domesticate plants and animals. This was the agricultural revolution, and it would change everything. Instead of chasing animals, people began to keep herds of sheep, goats, and cattle. Instead of gathering wild grains, they learned to cultivate wheat and barley. This shift from a nomadic lifestyle to a settled agricultural one was not sudden, nor was it necessarily an immediate improvement in the quality of life for everyone. Early farmers often worked harder and had a less varied diet than hunter-gatherers. They also became more vulnerable to famine if their crops failed, and diseases spread more easily in densely populated settlements. Yet agriculture had one crucial advantage. It could support much larger populations in a given area. Section 5. Order from chaos. Empires rise. Laws are written. As cities grew and societies became more complex in Mesopotamia and elsewhere, new challenges arose. How do you manage thousands or tens of thousands of people living together? How do you resolve disputes, organize large-scale projects like irrigation canals or defensive walls, and defend against rivals? The answer often was the emergence of more powerful, centralized forms of authority. Chieftainships evolved into kingdoms, and kingdoms through conquest and alliance sometimes grew into vast empires, uniting diverse peoples under a single ruler. These early empires, such as the Akkadian Empire under Sargon the Great, or later the Babylonian and Assyrian empires, were built on a combination of military might, administrative organization, and ideology. rulers often claimed divine sanction for their power, presenting themselves as chosen by the gods. They collected taxes, conscripted soldiers, and established bureaucracies to manage their territories. These empires facilitated trade and cultural exchange over large areas, but they also brought conflict, oppression, and the subjugation of conquered peoples. Section 6. Golden Ages, Wisdom, Warriors, and Wonders. As civilizations matured, some experienced periods of remarkable cultural, intellectual, and artistic flourishing, often referred to as Golden Ages. These were times when new ideas took root, great thinkers emerged, and empires expanded their influence not just through force, but through the power of their culture and innovations. One such period saw the rise of profound philosophical and religious teachings that would shape the lives of billions for millennia to come. In India, around the 6th century BCE, Siddhartha Gautama, later known as the Buddha, offered a path to enlightenment and an end to suffering. The Buddha's teachings, emphasizing mindfulness, compassion, and the Four Noble Truths, spread across Asia, offering a spiritual alternative to existing traditions. Around the same time, in China, Confucius was developing a philosophy focused on ethics, social harmony, and good governance. In ancient Greece, philosophers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle laid the foundations of Western philosophy, exploring questions of logic, ethics, politics, and the nature of reality. Section 7. The Medieval Tapestry, Faith, Fury, and Frailty. The centuries following the decline of classical empires like Rome ushered in what is often termed the medieval period, or the Middle Ages. This was a complex era, far from the Dark Ages it was once simplistically labeled. In the 7th century CE, a new monotheistic religion, Islam, emerged from the Arabian Peninsula. Inspired by the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, Islamic civilization rapidly expanded, creating a vast caliphate that stretched from Spain to India. This era saw a remarkable flourishing of science, mathematics, medicine, and philosophy in the Islamic world, preserving and building upon classical knowledge. While Europe was more fragmented politically after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, it was not stagnant. Various kingdoms rose, and Christianity became a dominant unifying force. Monasteries became centers of learning and manuscript preservation. Further north, the Vikings, skilled seafarers and warriors from Scandinavia, embarked on daring voyages of exploration, trade, and raiding. They reached Iceland, Greenland, and even briefly North America, centuries before Columbus. Section 8. New Worlds, New Thoughts, The Great Unraveling. The late medieval period and the centuries that followed witnessed a series of transformations that began to unravel the old order and lay the groundwork for the modern world. The European Renaissance, starting in Italy around the 14th century, marked a fervent rediscovery of classical art, literature, and philosophy. This rebirth fostered a new spirit of humanism, focusing on human potential and achievements. Thinkers and artists like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo pushed the boundaries of knowledge and creativity. The invention of the printing press by Johannes Gutenberg around 1440 revolutionized the spread of information, making books more accessible and fueling literacy. This era was also characterized by the Age of Exploration. Driven by a desire for new trade routes to Asia, wealth, and Christian expansion, European navigators embarked on daring oceanic voyages. Section 9. The Endless Frontier, Humanity's Quest for More. The momentum of change accelerated dramatically in the 18th and 19th centuries with the Enlightenment, which championed reason, individual rights, and secular governance, leading to political revolutions in America and France. This was followed by the Industrial Revolution, beginning in Great Britain. The invention of the steam engine, the mechanization of textile production, and the development of factories transformed economies and societies. Masses of people moved from rural areas to burgeoning cities, seeking work in often harsh conditions. This era brought unprecedented material productivity but also new social problems, pollution, overcrowding, and stark class divisions. The 20th century was a period of extremes. It witnessed two devastating world wars, the rise and fall of totalitarian ideologies like fascism and communism, and the ever-present threat of nuclear annihilation during the Cold War. Yet, it also saw incredible scientific and technological progress, the advent of aviation, antibiotics, space exploration, and the beginnings of the digital revolution. The global population soared, empires crumbled, and new nations emerged. Movements for civil rights, women's rights, and decolonization reshaped social and political landscapes across the globe, striving for greater equality and justice.